Welcome, everyone. I'm Laura Weaver with Campus Compact, and without further delay, I want to welcome you all to the very first of our Impact Awards series. And today we are featuring Michigan State University's Center for Community Engaged Learning. They were one of our awardees for the Excellence in Civic and Community Engagement Programming Award. They are going to be talking about their Community Engaged Learning Index. And I don't want to delay our conversation any further. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Renee, who's going to go ahead and get us started and kick us off today for the very first in our series. Renee, I'm handing it on over.
All right. Thank you, Laura. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Renee Miller-Zintek. I am the Executive Director for the Center for Community Engaged Learning and the Co-Director for MSU Vote here at Michigan State University. As we get started, I want to thank Campus Compact, their leadership and their team for hosting these showcases. We're really grateful for their efforts, both in the award and recognition space and also in this space where we're able to share education and stories and ideas with one another in our network across Campus Compact. So welcome. And I would like to have each of you, if you wouldn't mind, to introduce yourself in the chat. While you're doing that, we're also going to have our team introduce themselves. And we're going to start with Stephanie Brewer.
Hi, everyone. My name is Stephanie Brewer, she, her pronouns, and I am an Assistant Director for Community Engaged Teaching and Learning in the Center for Community Engaged Learning. Happy to be here.
Thank you, Stephanie. Michelle?
Hi, all. Michelle Snitchin, she, her pronouns, and I am the Assistant Director for Faculty Engagement and Strategic Initiatives in the Center for Community Engaged Learning at Michigan State. Welcome.
Catherine?
Hi, Catherine Anger, she, they pronouns. I am the Communications, Marketing, and Events Assistant for the Center for Community Engaged Learning.
And Sam?
Hi, everybody. My name is Sam Rothwell. I am a Program Coordinator here at the Center for Community Engaged Learning.
Thank you. And we are also joined by partners in University Outreach and Engagement who are a big part of helping us to put this index report together. Gada, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Gada Georges. I'm Associate Director for Communication and Information Technology at University Outreach and Engagement.
And the magic behind how the index looks so good, Mike, would you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. My name is Mike Davis, and I am a graphic designer with University Outreach and Engagement at Michigan State University.
Thanks, everyone. This is the team that works so hard year-round on the Community Engaged Learning Index, so I'm happy to be here with them. We thought we'd start off a little bit by sharing more about the Center for Community Engaged Learning. I'm sure others will take this claim too, but we have been told we're one of the oldest operating centers of this type in the nation. We were established in 1968, originally as a volunteer center. And shortly after opening at that time, we began supporting, I was not here then, but we began supporting faculty and course-based engagement. So over the 57 years that we've supported community engaged learning, both in the classroom and beyond, we have collaborated with faculty, students, and community partners all along the way. We report to 2 units. It's a little unique. We report both to academic affairs through university outreach and engagement, and student affairs through the Student Affairs Division. And that is a unique position in that we're able then to really take a look at community engaged learning across the entire span of a student's time here, both in academic spaces and in co-curricular spaces. We have an 8-person team, so not everyone is here. They might be here as participants, but I would just share with you there are other folks on our team, and they work on the index in different ways, but it is this team here that is meeting year-round to work on this. In our 8-person team, we're able to support things like service-focused registered student organizations, alternative breaks, student volunteering, and days of service. On the academic side, we support faculty development around community engaged learning. This can include things like workshops, learning communities, consultations. We provide student orientation and workshops both in the curricular and co-curricular space, and the same is true about partner coordination. So as has been mentioned, we do also produce the MSU Community Engaged Learning Index, and we're really excited to be able to share that with you today. One housekeeping note, these slides will be shared with folks after this presentation, so we're happy to be able to do that. And so for today's session, we're going to cover how the Community Engaged Learning Index was developed, how we've operationalized this work using a team-based approach, and discuss with you how this type of effort could evolve on your own campus or even more on ours. We love to get great ideas from our colleagues, so we're hoping to hear more from you during the question and answer session. By the end of the session, we're hoping that you will understand the process that we use to collect and share data, to learn why we chose this specific approach, and learn some takeaway lessons that we've had along the way. All right, so in true community engaged learning fashion, we have some pre-flexion for you all to think about too. So we'd like you to take a moment and think about what's happening in regard to community engaged teaching and learning on your campus, how you're collecting and sharing information, and if the collection and sharing process is working for you. So go ahead and take a moment to ponder that, and then we'll continue with our presentation. And keep your notes there so we can come back to these questions. All right, thank you. Okay, so a little bit about the index that we can share, and you're going to hear a whole lot more. Our first index was launched in 2016, and it covered 2 years. So it was a larger undertaking than we thought it would be, and it took us a bit to get that particular publication underway. So we started off doing 2 years of data. At that time, student registrations were steadily increasing in community engaged learning, and by 2012 we were at 20,739. We report student registrations with self-reporting that comes from faculty, professional staff, and student organizations. And it's our formal requirement to report annual, and I'll say service learning registrations here to the Board of Trustees. And I'll tell you a little bit why we'll say that service learning, although we use AKA community engaged learning here at Michigan State University. So some challenges we've faced in putting together this in this index is there's a lot of inconsistent language across the field and across our campus in terms of what this is called and what's included. So anything from internships to volunteering to advocacy to clinicals, right? So thinking about how community engaged learning can be present in all of those types of activities and the language that we have for that. So that's been a little bit of a challenge. Also, there's been some institutional infrastructure kind of missing. So there is really no standard definition or tracking system, no required course designators, no centralized logging of student participation, and no other system of capturing this type of engagement. So you can imagine when we were told that we needed to present the number of student registrations each year, both academically and co-curricularly, to our Board of Trustees, we were kind of starting from ground zero. And we found out quickly too, that sometimes requiring things, not in our case, but requiring folks around campus, requiring folks around campus to share this information was a challenge. So we went the other route. We went the route of let's tell the stories and information about community engaged learning at Michigan State University. And we worked with folks to develop a tool that could then be shared, the index, more broadly. And so when folks are contributing to the index, they're also knowing that this data is being shared in the highest levels with our community partners and with students as well. So we created the index report to tell stories, to elevate the work of students, faculty, and community partners. And since our center has continued to publish the index, we are now seen as a trusted resource campus-wide for community engaged learning data and impact stories. So one of the things that we thought we would share is a little bit of how our numbers have been. As I mentioned, the first 2 editions of the index were 2-year editions, right? So there was an inaugural report in 2016. In 2016, 2018, if you're looking at these numbers, some things that were going on our campus, we established the Spartan Volunteer Service Award, and our unit also won the Governor's Service Award. So things were on the rise. In 1819, we moved to a 1-year report, and that was our 50th anniversary. And as I'm sure all of you have experienced, in the next couple of years, we were dealing with the pandemic and trying to figure out how to do some of this work virtually and maintain relationships that we have with community partners, faculty, and students. In 21-22, we were named number 2 among publics by the U.S. News and World Report in the category of service learning, so that ranking for service learning. So again, you can see the language here. The U.S. News Report, World Report uses service learning, and we use a broader umbrella, community engaged learning, which we can share more about that a little bit later, but it includes all types of community engaged learning. And then in 22-23, unfortunately, our campus encountered the February 13 shootings, and many of our students were attending school from home for most of the spring semester. And that also presented challenges in all different ways in how we could keep students engaged with community engagement scholarship. Then in 23-24, we were named number 1 among publics by the U.S. News and World Report, and the same happened this year in 24-25. So you can see, we wanted to share how the data fluctuates based on the environment that you're in, the changes on your campus, and we've definitely experienced that here at Michigan State University as well. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to my colleague Stephanie, who will continue the story.
Thanks, Renee. Yeah, so Renee kind of covered our history, how we came to this point, and really why we do this. So this next section that we're moving into will be kind of the present. So how do we do it? We won't go into every detail because that would take up our whole time, but we'll give you kind of a general overview of what this looks like, how we gather this data. So we collect data for the index every year using a survey based in Qualtrics. Qualtrics, I'm sure most of you are familiar with, and perhaps you have a similar program on your campus. And as Renee mentioned, the Board of Trustees asks that we have the index data to them by their June meeting every year. So that's kind of what builds our backwards timeline. So we generally open the index surveys to campus around March to begin collecting all of that data. We have one survey specifically for student leaders, and then we have another survey specifically for faculty and academic staff within the academic colleges and the student affairs unit. And we ask respondents to provide the course or experience title, as well as the number of students involved in that experience. And you can see just a sampling of some of those survey questions here on this slide. So even though I mentioned that we open the surveys in March, I think it's really important to note, and Renee mentioned this as well, that we have this kind of internal cross-functional committee, all of these faces that you're seeing here today, that are really dedicated to the index project for the entirety of the year. So we're basically meeting year round, even though that survey is only open for that small portion of the academic calendar. So this team, we work from a shared calendar, and we draw in other teams, Gada and Mike, for example, as needed. And so, for example, we work with our UOE colleagues, who you'll hear from in just a second, on things like promotion and editing and design and web design and all of those skill sets that we don't have, for example. So yeah, it is a year-round experience. So also, as Renee mentioned, for the index, we collect and report on the number of student registrations rather than the unique student participants. And that was an intentional decision because we're really looking to understand and represent the really wide array of experiences that are offered and organized across campus, again, both within and beyond the classroom. We are a decentralized campus, so nobody is actually required to report to us, which can be challenging. And we have found that if we were to ask for actual student lists and names to look at those unique student participants, we would not even begin to capture the scope of the experiences that are being offered across campus. It would really limit the story that we're able to tell with this data. So we attempt to keep the survey simple because we need people to fill it out. And we know that once we have their basic information, if we need more, we can always go back to them for elaboration. We've also found, as Renee mentioned, that we really need the folks on our campus to see themselves in the definition of community engaged learning, right? So we have 17 different colleges, many more disciplines, again, as well as the beyond the classroom programming. And they're just not going to complete the survey unless they think that we're talking to them, right? So we've gotten a little bit more savvy over time in our tools to help people come together in kind of the shared definition. So one of the ways that we do that is through a decision tree that we designed, and you can see here on the slide, to help people really understand what we mean when we're asking about community engaged learning and asking them to report on their experiences. This decision tree is right at the very beginning of the survey, so they can identify really right away at the beginning whether or not we want their information, which usually, P.S., we do. We want that information. And again, you can see that we've tried to keep this simple to encourage participation, like follow this little trail, give us your data. Another strategy that we use is we have put the social change wheel right in the survey as a question in order to depict and highlight the different strategies for social change that we in our center are looking to have reported on. So again, even if that terminology doesn't resonate with those folks, hopefully those different categories of the social change wheel do. And we really use this as a framework in our center, and we find that it helps our faculty and staff to see the work that they're doing as community engaged learning, again, whether or not they would actually use that language themselves or not. So I'm going to turn it over to Sam now to continue to elaborate on how we make this happen.
Yeah, thank you, Stephanie. So as Stephanie mentioned, MSU is a very, very large and complex institution, over 50,000 students, over 3,000 instructional faculty, and none of them actually have to fill out our survey. So we have to use a variety of strategies for our data collection. So the biggest one, the first thing we do, we draft email language and we send it to CIT to make it look pretty and professional. And then they send it out to a large contact list that they maintain of many of the many people across campus who have either completed the survey before, who are interested in community engaged learning. So we get it in front of as wide an audience as we can right off. In addition to that, we send out what we call our college level reports, which you can see on the slide here. So this is an example. It could be for like the College of Arts and Letters. It lets them know the total number of registrations on campus, and then the total number for their college. And we break it down by the academic community engaged learning, what they did in the classroom, and the beyond the classroom stuff, so co-curricular things. And we do this kind of for two reasons. The first being to show the deans, hey, look at all the wonderful stuff that your faculty is doing. Isn't this amazing? And then also to say, hey, maybe you know that Professor X did this course last year and it's not on that list. Why is that? So kind of motivate them to make sure that in the next go around that they're submitting everything that they know that their college is doing and to get their numbers as high as they can be. So we also support a wide variety of courses through our center. Stephanie and Michelle do a wonderful job of making like learning communities and workshops for our faculty, so they know a lot of what is going on campus in that regards. So they know that as survey results come in, they know that, oh, Professor so-and-so hasn't submitted their data. They know that this course is community engaged, and they know that they might need a little bit of prodding to get it going. We also do placements through our center. So students are placed in with community partners for engagement opportunities. So we have ready access to all those data as well, which is very, very nice. So once we've done these kind of broad communications, we can start to kind of narrow our focus. So we have a lot of relationships with units across campus, just either personally as staff or working relationships with our fellow colleagues in like student affairs. So for example, one of our colleagues has connections with the athletic department. He knows the person who collects all the data for athlete volunteering, so he can just reach out, hey, how's it going? Can we get those numbers for this year? Which is very, very helpful to have those one-on-one personal relationships when it comes to having people fill out a survey they don't have to fill out. We can also use mail merge. So a lot of the stuff we do surrounds the data that we got the previous year. So when we know what people submitted last year, we know what to look for this year. So we can send out personalized emails using last year's data saying, hey, Professor X, thank you so much for filling this out last year. Last year you submitted course X, Y, and Z and all the wonderful stuff you did with this group. If you did that this year again, we'd love to hear about it again. If you did something else, we'd love to hear about that too. And it adds that kind of personal note of, hey, we really thank you for filling this out. We know that you filled it out and we really appreciate it. And it can remind them, oh yeah, I submitted this last year and it still meets the criteria they put at the front of the survey. So in addition to all that stuff, reaching out to staff and faculty, we also do reach out to registered student organizations. So we here at MSU, we have over 1,100 registered student organizations, and many of them are service-based. So we do kind of the same thing. We send out a big overarching email to the advisors and the presidents saying, survey's open, we'd love to hear what you're doing. And we also do a mail merge of whatever they did last year, which is really helpful because there's a lot of turnover at the kind of president position as students graduate. So it's useful to see, oh, this is what got submitted last year. In addition to that, we have student staff here in our office who we have make cold calls to student organizations as well. We find that sometimes students aren't the best at monitoring their emails. So having someone call them and say, hey, check this out, it's in your inbox, can be very helpful for when it comes to collecting data directly from students. And finally, once we've got kind of everything, we do kind of like the last mopping up thing. If we compare it to last year's data, we can say, well, we have this big hole here from, the College of Social Work didn't submit anything this year, or we got absolutely nothing from the College of Veterinary Medicine. So we can use that to kind of focus on the last kind of things of let's get this, let's get this, get this, and have it be, our data be as complete as possible. And yeah, so now I'm going to turn it over to Catherine to talk about writing stories.
Yes, thank you. So after the data is gathered, we turn it into a full written report. So the communications assistant, leads the way on coordinating that. And I'm currently wrapping up my first year as a part of the index team. So I can at least talk about how I approached it this cycle for 24-25. So on one hand, we kind of, part of this applies as like an annual report for community, like Center for Community Engaged Learning programs. So like our student organizations, kind of our initiatives. So like identifying major events and stats for the year, key regular programs to highlight, and then working with our staff to craft like a highlight of what was significant, and then working with the index team to fit all the pieces together for consistency as one report. On the other hand, there's also our college and program features as examples of different projects and engagement strategies from around campus that we pull from this data that's filled out by faculty members and student organization leaders. So on the survey, there is a checkbox to indicate, so on the survey for this year at least, there was a checkbox to indicate if you were interested in being contacted for a story. And then those names were collected into a list. I also reviewed past editions of the index to see how often different colleges, units, and divisions were represented before, if we were missing anybody who hadn't been seen in a while or just hadn't shown up at all, so that we could make note of that when looking through the list. First picks, like first round outreach on stories, were made as, like, those decisions were made as an index team based on what our interests were, kind of like what sounded unique, like community engaged learning in the Department of Theater, for example, or our on-campus radio station, or a seminar with volunteer, like companionship volunteering in a hospice facility, like stories that kind of represented this like wide range of subject areas and like maybe like just sounded particularly interesting. We also look, and then after that, we kind of went through and identified like interesting picks from each college or program around campus and started there with a focus on promoting a wide variety of disciplines across campus and communities that students engaged with and the level of student engagement. So for about 2.5 months following the end of the spring 2025 semester, we contacted for faculty and students for scheduling interviews, recorded interviews with them, and then transcribed and wrote from I transcribed it and with with the audio that was captured during those interviews, and then as well as reviewed shared materials about the projects that they worked on. There were sometimes stories don't work out, and in that case, I noted it for next year. So like maybe it didn't work out because like the contact, like just we didn't quite have, like there was one example of a student who got involved after the project was reported. And so, but they were planning to be involved next year. So I noted that they were a possible contact for next year because we still wanted to potentially write about this project. I believe that covers most of my process. So basically just like interviewing, like finding what would make for a good story that is a unique example of community engaged learning on campus, and interviewing and putting it all into a story. And then once all of this material is collected, we pass it along to our colleagues in communications and information technology. So I will pass it to Gada and Mike.
So, like I said earlier, I'm with Communication and Information Technology. We are one department of University Outreach and Engagement. There are 9, and Center for Community Engaged Learning is also one of those departments. We provide services. That's what our unit does. That's what CIT does. And the types of services that we provide are, web development and information system development, publication support, graphic design, event support, and communications and marketing. So the index is one of the initiatives that we work on annually, and we love working on this project. Our work in the index starts with promoting the survey, like was said earlier. We use Constant Contact as the email platform for sending out these messages. And it goes out to, we send this obviously to only the MSU email addresses. And those are predominantly faculty and academic staff. And we also have some other types of staff and students on that MSU list, but predominantly faculty and academic staff. And like was said earlier, this is the basis for the index report, the responses. Our process is, like I said earlier, Renee and her team work on the content, which is really the biggest bulk of the work, the collecting the data, writing the stories, etc. Once that's done, we have an editor who goes through it in great amount of detail, lots of back and forth with the index team to make sure that everything's clarified. and then it gets built on the website, on the Community Engaged Learning website. We have a micro part of the site that's dedicated to the index, so you could actually see all of the previous indexes as well on the landing page. And then, of course, the current one is the prominent one. Mike Davis, our graphic designer, is going to talk about, his process, his design process. But again, once everything's complete and the index team has gone back to review it over again, because, inevitably we always miss things and there's always things that we overlook. Then we promote it once again, the full index to using Constant Contact once again. We promote it to the MSU community. And now I'm going to hand it off to Mike, who will talk about his design process.
Sure, thank you. So a lot of the design process is basically taking all of the content that everyone else has gathered by this point. By the time it gets to me, it's in a pretty good place. And so a lot of it is just going through, reading all of the stories that are in there, reading all of the highlights to kind of get a sense of what the overall kind of story for the year is. Then it's a lot of research, design inspiration, things like that, trying to define what the overall look and feel would be, doing a lot of ideating to kind of figure out, all right, what's going to look best this year? Did we do something like this the year before? Trying to figure out what the animations are going to look like, what the infographics are going to look like, what's best going to highlight the different numbers and the different pieces of stories. Because a lot of times it's just a nice long document and it reads great, but what does that actually translate to how it looks like? And a lot of my time is spent looking through those stories, trying to figure out what are those pieces to highlight and how to build all of those things. A lot of it is a lot of custom code for their site. A lot of the design pieces are just different pieces of code that I write specifically for each index each year. So the hardest one was, of course, the very first one where we were trying to figure out what the sections were, how to put it all together. And now we're at a point where, because of the structure that we have to the index, the different sections that we have in there, it's very easy to understand what parts go where and what sections need to be built, and what sort of graphics need to go into each section. And all of that just kind of comes together. And finally, once I have a good sense of all of those pieces, I build a good prototype, send that back to the C-Cell team so that they can take a look at it. We go back and forth to make sure that every piece is in the right spot and everything looks good. And then from there, we, like Gata said, we put together a good email that sends this thing out to everybody to let them know that the index is done. And that's kind of how it goes every year.
Yeah, we could not make this as, I don't know, we would not be presenting on this today if we did not have Mike and Gata and the team within University Outreach and Engagement. It's been a really stellar partnership. So thank you both for being here and sharing. You can see this is an incredible team effort, and presently we have a lot of strengths. But we also have a lot of challenges that we kind of work through, and every year is a little bumpy in its own way. So I'm just going to highlight a few challenges, but then also the strengths. So again, super proud of what we accomplish every year. But despite all of these comprehensive efforts, it really is still challenging to get folks to complete the survey because they're not required to do so. And Sam talked a lot about that. And as a result, we've had to keep what we ask in the survey really minimal. And so our data points are limited in what we collect. We've also really streamlined this process over the years, which has been really a lot of process improvements, but it takes a lot of staff effort and time, as you can see by the number of folks that are on this webinar. So that's definitely a challenge. And then our survey is one of a number of surveys that are distributed around the same time. So we all know a little bit about survey fatigue. Some of the surveys distributed around the same time are also about community outreach and engagement. And so we're just always competing for folks' time who are already doing really time-intensive work for community engaged scholarly efforts. So those are just some things that we work through. And we do work through those, but we also have a lot of benefits that I hopefully have come across as we've been talking about this over the last half hour. So the index really supports ongoing relationship building across a wide range of departments and colleges, and that builds trust and visibility. And that's something that happens year after year. And so that's been really important, and especially positioning our center as kind of that campus partner who highlights and celebrates other successes. And that's really a strategic move on our part. But also it is important to show that good work, and folks want to see their good work recognized. It's an opportunity to highlight and spotlight this really critical work that's happening on campus and in our communities, and showcasing those students and faculty and partners and projects that kind of broaden our campus and community connections. And then the index serves as this reliable resource for showcasing MSU's engagement among a wide variety of audiences, including funders, supporters, and other champions. And as a center, we refer all of these audiences to the index kind of as a tool to showcase this good work, but also other campus partners and community partners use it as a reference point also. So that's been really important. And then it just has this kind of multifunctional set of strengths. It meets our annual reporting needs within our center, helps tell this story all across MSU when there's not a kind of central data set or kind of landing space. And then we really use the process and the information as tools to help us reflect on our own work and think about how we can continually develop new partnerships and strengths and growth opportunities to inform our strategy moving forward. So that's really our kind of present state. And building on those strengths as we look to the future, we have a number of ideas. We have no shortage of ideas in our center, but specifically related to this at this point, we would really love to do some data collection and kind of more targeted story collection from partners, involve partners more in the planning and the kind of implementation of the index. We hope to also look more deeply into the demographics of who is completing the survey. So do we have more tenure track, non-tenure, staff, and grads, postdocs, like who's filling this out, and what does that mean for our projects? What does that mean for our community partners, and look into that a little bit. We also intend to continue building out the champions across campus, and we've considered establishing an advisory committee for the report. And then, of course, everyone's favorite, creating a fund development strategy for the work has been something that we have often discussed. So that really concludes the kind of formal presentation that we have for you. We'd like to end this session with a little bit of a bookend to our pre-flexion that we did. And here's some reflection questions that you can take a moment to consider. Kind of what did you learn today, and what might you be hoping to apply? How did this session inform the way that you're thinking about this process on your own campus? And then, are there recommendations that you have for us? As Renee mentioned in the beginning, we always love gathering input from our peers at other institutions. And then we are opening up the floor for questions and would love to have some conversation.
Absolutely. So thank you to everyone for helping to tell the story. We certainly appreciate that. I'm wondering if we can unpin ourselves so that we can see if folks want to raise their hand. If you have questions, that might be helpful. I don't know if that's possible. All right. Well, hello. So questions for us.
I just want to thank you all first and foremost. This was great. And I really hope that I'm excited to hear what others have to say. And I know I have always been very curious to learn more about your index. And so this was really helpful on my end of things. So I want to open it up to everyone else and we can go from there. I'm also copying down your reflection questions, and then maybe we can have everybody, we can unshare the screen and we can see everybody in their full boxes.
You just let me know when you're ready, Laura. I'll unshare.
I'm finishing up the last one right now.
Mhm.
Okay, I've got the last one. So I'm putting those in, and I see we do have someone's hand raised. So Lisa.
Yes, hi. So I'm really excited about this because tracking has been a huge issue for us. I'm calling from Franklin and Marshall College in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And my question is really about, you talked about your desire to start really including community partners in the index and the collection and that type of thing. How do you track your engagement with partners at this point? And do you report anything on that? Do you look for any, like, are there partners that get tapped consistently or over tapped, and how are you kind of keeping a handle on that?
Well, I can start, and then if others want to answer, that would be great. And Bert, you're feel free too to join in for your effort. But we don't currently have a way to report about community partners. We in the center know who our partners are. We hold community partner gatherings every year. We offer a host of resources and supports for community partners. We haven't yet been in that space of reporting out community partner activity. One of the reasons that we want to, include partners is because obviously they're a huge part of the story. And also, we know that the community partners that are in our local area are working with multiple units, divisions, and colleges. And we know that partners will tell us yet another story about who they're working with and help us to complete the full cycle of that. So I don't know, CCL or others, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think I can just add that within our center, we do have memorandum of understanding that we, sign with community partners that are doing kind of joint efforts within our center. And then we have kind of those databases where students are registering for positions, and we have partners who post in there and kind of register in there. So we kind of are tracking those in our center tangentially. But again, as Renee mentioned, nothing kind of consistently or tied into the index. And the index has been a really great way. We do ask, what community partners are you working with? And that's a question that everyone who reports in the survey is supposed to fill out. And so then we do have those lists of kind of folks, so we can see what is happening across our community and state, and sometimes nationally and internationally. So, but there's a lot more to do with all of that for sure.
So I know Darby has her hand up, and we have a couple of questions in the chat. So if team members want to try to address those, or we can try to address them verbally here too. Darby, what is your question?
Yeah, actually, I had a question about community partners. So I feel like you just answered it, and lots of the questions in the chat look great. So I'll back up.
All right, let's see. I'm seeing a question from Layla. How do you mitigate data collection with others on your campus collecting data about CE? And how do you share or collaborate in any way or compare? So in terms of community engaged learning, there's only one other effort that we know is collecting somewhat similar information, and that our colleague Bert Bargerstock is here. He creates things for the outreach. OE, outreach and engagement measurement instrument. And that is used in lots of different ways. Bert's drive is more around the tracking of faculty scholarship, where our tracking is around student engagement in these activities. So there's a little bit of a difference there. We're also collecting data curricularly, so in course-based work, but also co-curricularly, which is maybe not necessarily the space that the tracking for community engagement scholarship is in. I don't know, Bert, do you have anything to add to that?
I think the other thing that I would say is that we've been doing these kinds of this kind of survey work for a lot of years. And before we started that, we did an inventory of the kinds of data collection that were already existing on campus to determine whether or not there was extant data already being collected by others that might be useful to us. We're also given permission to make small changes to some of those instruments. The reality is that we didn't get a lot good, and we didn't get a lot good that stuck. So for example, things like transmittal letters that are done by Contracts and Grants Administration, when you've got work that might involve students or might not involve students, it's on a contract or a grant. At one point in time, we had a checkbox on their form about whether or not the work, if funded, would involve significant amount of community engagement. And I think over time, the folks, we view it as an accomplishment. We got the checkbox on their form, but then, round 2 of the new system comes in and nobody remembers to defend that. We're not at the table as much. And so it's a challenge to sort of stay present as groups are making decisions about how they're going to collect data and try to represent ourselves. And I think luckily on a lot of universities, we're very decentralized. I know Renee runs, as fast as she can, and so do I, to try to keep up with those things, but it is work.
Thanks, Bert.
Renee,
So some other questions, yes.
Well, I was just going to say, Jonah's question is kind of connected to what you and Bert were just talking about, where they were curious about how this like overlaps with the research versus teaching, the translation around outreach. So I don't know if either of you want to expand a little bit on your answers to take that into consideration as well.
I'm looking for the question. Here we go. Okay, so in the Community Engaged Learning Index, we're entirely focused on the scholarship of community engaged teaching and learning. And from that perspective of student engagement in those spaces. But of course, our center works with faculty in all kinds of ways. As we mentioned in the beginning, we offer training, workshops, and learning communities and support to folks. But again, it's in the space of community engaged teaching and learning. And then the expansion of that would be across university outreach and engagement, getting into these other spaces, research, and so on. I hope that covers that question. Let's see. Lisa, again, asking, do we offer co-curricular transcript? And if do we control the entry? Is it completed by students? So in our undergraduate education unit here at Michigan State University, we do have a co-curricular transcript process. We're very close partners with that particular effort, and we do share all of our data into that transcript. We also hear from the folks that run the transcript program that they share back with us things that are coming in that maybe were not captured by our index survey. So it really takes partnership across campus to be able to capture all of this. But I'm told that community engaged learning is one of the bigger sections that students are engaging with on the Spartan experience record, which is what is called here. All right, let's see. Got a couple more minutes.
I see that there was also a question around the timeline about like wondering what the timeline is for your process every year, how long from when you create the new version of the survey all the way through the publication and the dissemination of the index. So like, what does that timeline look like?
All year, all the time. But I don't know, Michelle, would you like to talk about that? You help our team stay on target in that space. Maybe you'd like to answer that question.
It is definitely a year-round process. We meet most weeks throughout the year, but we just have a pretty steady calendar that helps us go through the process. But really, we work on starting to create the new surveys in the winter, like December and January, but it's kind of moved into February now, and then launch the surveys in very early March, and then do data collection until May. And that's where, kind of infuse some different timelines within there until May, so that we can do that broad dissemination and then targeted outreach. And then we have typically reported the numbers to our board of trustees in May as well, or early June occasionally. So once that happens, we kind of figure out all the story collection and writing up of all the stories and get it to our friends in the CIT team, typically in July at some point. And then it's really October most years that we are able to send out the new beautiful copy of the index and those college level reports that get put together and kind of sent along with the new index, saying, hey, here's what's going on. And then we use those multiple times throughout the year to just try to garner more support and interest for completing the surveys. So hopefully that is helpful. We're also happy to follow up with any of these conversations. We'll put Renee's contact information in the chat, and she can kind of funnel any of your questions if you reach out after. And we're happy to share our calendaring and anything else that might be of use. I think there's also someone asking if there's a place to see what questions are asked on the survey, and we can certainly send out some PDFs with that too.
Yeah, happy to send that and the slides. And you have access to the actual index reports. I shared that link earlier. It's on our website. I know there's a question here about wanting people to complete the survey and hoping that they see themselves then in the report or in the collection, and how the index benefits them. And so, yeah, for students, the stories are actually the key for students and for faculty. It really elevates the hard work that they do. There are never enough places to recognize this type of work, and for professors that are really teaching professors, this is a great place for them to be able to highlight that work and have other colleagues see what they're up to. We also have people take those stories and they share them with their own advisory committees. They also share them at times with fund development efforts as well. So it's really good to have that captured and be able to have it in a format where people can use it in ways that make sense to them. I know students are, as was mentioned earlier, they regenerate. So it's always good when we have a student who has been part of this process or with their student org or in a co-curricular program who isn't graduating. And so they are able to, reap the benefit of telling that story. And I would say that's, probably a 50-50 proposition, because by the time students are really engaged in that way, they might be in their junior year, they might be in their senior.
Can I just add to that answer too, Renee? I think you're spot on. And I also just wanted to highlight, I think that this work of getting our campus community to share this definition with us is absolutely supported and iterated by the index. And it's not the only avenue by which we are continuing to do that work. So I think that it's part of it's a larger kind of context of faculty and staff support across campus that is continually working to make sure that folks see themselves in this definition and this work. And then the index is one of those tools by which we are able to tell that story and again, to reiterate and kind of solidify for them that identity as a community engaged practitioner of sorts. So yes, and.
Thank you, Stephanie. All right, are we missing any questions in the chat? Are there any questions people would like to ask?
I think we've covered everything in the chat, and I'm not seeing any additional hands raised, but that doesn't mean that someone might have that burning question they still may want to ask. So please.
Laura, this
Yes.
is Alexis. I just maybe wanted to say something quickly. We do, I think for those of us who have campuses where we do have a designation or an attribute, I'm grappling with what Renee was describing of like some of the drop off and people not continuing to designate their course. So I could see this actually being a really elegant way to start to collect information about the people that are doing community engaged work that aren't getting that attribute, and then using it to reverse engineer working with those people to get them to actually do the process of designation so we can be tracking that with our registrar, et cetera.
Yeah, I thank you, Alexis. That's a great point. It's something that we've looked at, struggled with, and tried to make some decisions about, you know, do we advocate for a course designator? Do we advocate for the full use of course attributes? And we have kind of come to the conclusion that even if we did, first, I don't think we have the power to do that. But even if that were to happen, we know we would still be missing things and would come right back to this format anyway. It's kind of using, like, in some ways, an asset-based approach. Like, we're working with the people that are doing the work and want to share about the work and want to see this movement grow and grow. And that is delightful. Like I was mentioning earlier, sometimes when you require things, you get less participation. And that's just something that on a campus our size, we'd have to move a mountain to get the requirement, and then we'd have to backtrack probably still to collect the information that we're looking for. So thanks for raising that. Jamel?
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly kind of piggyback off of what Alexis just kind of said there in terms of transcript distinctions. I know that's something that the University of Pittsburgh we're trying to reactivate. Part of it might be, either with a new faculty member that's taking this on, or a new department taking this on, or trying to maybe move it to a different area on campus. But I think what we've noticed, at least going through this last reclassification process, is that we've had a strong partnership with the provost's office in terms of the data collection that we need to identify the courses that fit into this space. So I was just kind of wondering how that partnership looks like at the academic level, with those leaders that allow you to be able to not only tag courses appropriately, but to really take on the challenge of making sure that their faculty in each of the schools are, being, I guess, encouraged to make sure that courses are updated appropriately, so that that's data that can be pulled from institutional research. I'm just wanting to know about the strength of your partnerships there in those offices.
So, I mean, we report to the provost's office through our VP for University Outreach and Engagement. I guess what I would tell you is there's quite a movement on our campus to promote and to grow high impact practice in the classroom. And so there are so many, it's not just us, there are other folks that would be looking for that sort of thing. We have not encountered a situation yet, though, where this would become a mandate across campus. And that's not to say we would not do that. It's just, it would be a huge undertaking here at Michigan State University with our 17 colleges. So we would need partners that are working in those high impact spaces to also be asking for this sort of course designator. It would probably end up being a suite of designations, not just for community engaged learning. So again, that's a fish we haven't been able to fry just yet.
Okay. Well,
I don't
appreciate
know if
that.
that's helpful or not. I know we're at time. I wanted to thank Bert for mentioning the Carnegie classification. We did draw from our index reports to be able to complete our reapplication for the Carnegie. classification, and it is absolutely wonderful to have those things at our fingertips as we're putting that together. And on behalf of our team, I just want to thank everybody for joining us. It means so much that you're interested and that you're here with us. And we're happy to keep the conversation going as well. So thank you again, and thank you to Campus Compact for allowing us to share more about our index report. And have a wonderful week.
Yes, thank you everyone for being here. We're thrilled that MSU was able to kick off our very first session for our Impact Award highlight series. If you haven't registered for any of the other sessions, there is still time to do that, and we will be continuously adding more sessions to the series. Thank you all, and we will see you next time.